Hi, I'm Sara Levin, the Artful Inker. I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator in the United States. Welcome to my YouTube channel and today's, or January's, Global Stampin' Video Hop. This is the card that I'll be sharing with you today. Let me set it aside and let's get started. To start, we're going to use the Painted Texture 3D Embossing folder from the January through June Stampin' Up! Mini Catalog. And I've already embossed a piece of Coastal Cabana. Isn't that texture wonderful? And then I've got a piece of scrap paper and my Versamark ink pad. And I'm just going to take the corner of my Versamark and come along and try to hit just some of these highlights on here. And by highlights, I mean some of the raised portions. We don't need to hit every little raised bit on here. And let's see, we might want a little bit up in here. And let's see if we can get a couple pieces going that direction. And I'm just twisting my card stock piece here to be able to see where the Versamark has hit. Okay. Set that aside, and then I've got my heat and stick powder. That's also in the January to June Stampin' Up! Mini Catalog. And I've either touched or gotten a little too much Versamark on here, so I'm just going to take my finger and come along here and remove some of it. Now, there we go. We've all done this with embossing powders, and heat and stick in some ways is like an embossing powder. Except when it's heated properly, it is sticky after heating. Okay, let's do that. Let's set this aside and cap that up, and I'm just going to sweep my hand across here a second. Okay, let's preheat our heat tool. And then you can see the white on here from the heat and stick. And I'm just going to heat each area just until it melts. So, real quick, once it melts, move on to the next area. Okay, and we'll get this last bit here. Okay, let's bring that scrap piece back in, and our piece of cardstock now with the heat and stick, and then going to pull out some of the gilded leafing and shake it across the top of my piece here. Put that aside. And then I've just got one of the blending brushes here, and I'm going to start and move this around and rub the gilded leafing into those areas with the heat and stick. And we're looking for a kind of little goldy distress on our embossed piece, and that's exactly what we're getting here. It's got some great texture, even more than with just the embossing. Isn't that wonderful? Okay, so let's set this aside. I'm going to scoop this back in and be right back. Next, we're going to use one of these great flowering vine dies. Let me just grab that. And my piece of basic white. And my mini Stampin' Cut and Emboss. And we're just going to unfold that and add our plates here. And my die. And let's just run this on through. Now with the lighter weight machine, you are going to need to hold it in place. It doesn't have the small machine doesn't have the weight to hold itself in place, which makes sense. It's smaller. Smaller things weigh less. Let's take this out of the way and take a look at our die cut here. So we're just going to give this a couple little flicks, and these pieces just pop right on out. Oops. One last here, and isn't that pretty? So let's set this aside. Next, we're going to use pieces from the Forever and Always bundle, which is the Forever and Always stamp set, and then the Always dies. Let me set this aside. I've got a piece of Whisper White, the large Blossom from the stamp set, and my Memento ink. And we're just making sure that everything is well inked up. And then let's put that aside and give this a stamp and a press. Got to give a moment for the ink to transfer. Okay, set that aside. And then let's grab my Magenta Madness Stampin' Blends markers. And we'll pull the caps off, make sure I know which one is which. And we can zoom in here a little bit. And we're going to start with the dark. And then blend out with the light. And I like to do one petal at a time. That way the ink doesn't dry before you've had a chance to come back over and blend. Okay, and then the other thing that I like to do when there's this much surface area is go every other one with my coloring. So we'll work our way around, doing the same thing. And I like to come back in from the edge rather than color all the way up to the edge, because as you may know with alcohol markers, the ink continues to move a little bit. It wicks. And so by coloring away from the edge, you draw the ink back into the lines rather than running the risk of it crossing over the lines. And then we want a little bit of dark down here at the bottom. We're just using the shading that's already in these petals from the stamped image as our guide. I'm going to come all the way up against this folded piece here. This is pretty quick and easy. And again, we're going to add a little dark down here in the bottom and then come up with the light. Okay, so then I'm going to skip over to this one. since we've made our round once. Okay, and quick and easy. Just take your time as you get out to the edge of the petals. So that you're not coloring outside the lines or having your ink flow outside the lines. Okay. And then here's our last petal. And I'm coming along that dark to keep that ink wet for blending purposes. Okay, let's close my light, and then I want to come in with the bullet tip on my dark, and I'm going to stroke in a little bit of color on some of the shading areas. And again, we're just using what's already here for us from the stamped image to give it a little more detail. And the reason I do this at the end is so that that ink that we've laid down initially will have dried. We don't want this to blend. We want it to kind of lay on top. Okay, and there's our flower. Let's bring in my Stampin' Cut and Emboss, the mini, and we're going to cut this out. And put my plates in and put this down, and let's grab my die. And we just checking to see that I've got all of my outline where I can see it, and then putting down a piece of washi to hold that in place. And then crank that on through. Okay, let's move that out of the way. We'll put these pieces aside. There's our flower, ready to go. And then next, I have our sentiment already stamped. Let me zoom back out. There we go. I have our sentiment. We'll put that here. And I've used the mini messages bundle from the January to June mini, and that's the mini messages stamp here with all of these sentiments, and then the messages die, which is great. It cuts them all out at one time and then has a load of different shapes and some stitching and other fun details. So let's set that aside. Next, I have my card base, which is thick basic white, and it is 4 1/4 by 11 and scored at 5 1/2, and a piece of the True Love designer paper. This is 1/4 inch by 4 1/8, and we're just going to add that to the inside near the bottom here, and that makes a nice little accent on the inside of your card. Perfect for saving those extra little scrap pieces. This was an offcut from today's card. Okay, next I've got another piece of True Love designer paper. This is cut at 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and I don't normally cut the center out of my designer paper layers, but this time, since I'm just using it for the barest bit of border, I hated not to save that inside piece. It'll be a great layer on the front of another card. Okay, and this just has a tiny border all the way around on the thick basic white. Okay, make sure we're all adhered. And then this great marbled piece that we made at the beginning. And it's just a standard card front size of 4 by 5 1/4. Just getting all my dimensionals on. Oops. These in the corner don't want to come loose. Okay. I mentioned this before, but I'm kind of reminding myself I like to stock up on my adhesive during celebration, and I need to add that to my list of things that I'm going to purchase on my next order. Time to add some dimensionals. There we go. Okay, and then next I have that die cut from the Flowering Vine dies, and that's out of basic white. We're just going to add a little bit of adhesive on the center part here. I like to leave my die cuts kind of loose on the edges. It adds a little more texture to the card. Just want to make sure I've pressed down where I've actually added the multi-purpose. Okay, and then we're going to layer up our sentiment with a piece of the True Love designer paper. So I want to add a little bit of adhesive on the edge here. And then we're just going to stick that down. Just adjusting how much of this I want sticking out the bottom. And then let's take my paper snips, and we're going to follow this light diagonal here and come out here and give the same kind of light diagonal. That looks straight. Okay. And let's move these pieces out of the way. Then let's go ahead and add our dimensionals to the back of our flower here. And then we're going to dry fit these pieces to make sure that everybody's going to be where we want them to be. And this is going to come in under here. And then I want to add some of this Whisper White crinkled seam binding. And to do that, I'm going to add some tearing tape, just finding my end here. So since this is where I want these, okay, tear that, put it out of the way. Let's give this a little rub with my bone folder to make sure that it's adhered, and then it'll be easier to come in here and pick the backing paper off. Oh, I'm just not catching the edge of the backing paper. I'm coming under all the way. There we go. Okay, and then let's start and put this down. Okay, and that gives just a kind of cattywampus little ruffle going on, and we're going to angle cut this end and leave it hanging there just a little bit. Let's grab my mini dimensionals then, and we're going to stick those on the back of this piece right at the top, because our ribbon is going to be underneath the designer paper. Okay, and I put on lots of the mini dimensionals because they don't have as much surface area, and I don't want the ribbon pulling against the sentiment. Okay, so we've got that, and now let's pull this backing piece off. And we'll turn this a little bit. And there's our Forever and Always card. If you're in the US, you can use the link below to purchase your Stampin' Up! Products in my store. Give this video a thumbs up and share it with your card-making friends. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel and click the bell if you'd like to be notified the next time I upload a video. And since today is the Global Stampin' Video Hop, be sure to use the link in the description below to hop on to the next video in our series. Have a great day. Bye.